Ireland, 800 Years of Sadness, Episode 1, The Great Famine. The greatest empire ever in the world started with the conquest of Ireland in 1171, with such a small country being such a thorn in its side. Entire subcontinents like India and China were controlled with less force than was needed to subjugate Ireland. Before, during and after the Great Famine, Ireland was ruled by military occupation. In late 1845, disaster struck. Initially, the Irish potato fields were green and flowery. There was talk of disease in Germany, Belgium, United States and Canada. In August, blight struck the Isle of Wight, with potatoes in markets in London unfit to eat. In September, the disease was discovered in Ireland, with a dark spot appearing on the leaves. It spread quickly, and soon many fields had withered leaves and a terrible stench. The first discovery was on the coast in County Wexford. It spread quickly. A crop was okay one day, rotten the next. Potatoes, healthy when dug, decayed in the pit. Scientists proposed various remedies like ventilation and new ways of packing. None worked. Appeals were made to the government. Very little was done. Daniel O'Connell pointed to huge amounts of grain grown next to the failing potatoes that were leaving Ireland from numerous ports. The landlords took the food beyond the reach of those who were starving. From 1845 to 1850, over 50% of Britain's army, with Irishmen removed from their ranks, were deployed in Ireland to support the removal of massive amounts of food from the country. Daniel O'Connell and others proposed that food exports be stopped immediately and that Irish ports be allowed to receive food from elsewhere. All requests were denied. Tenants were left with nothing but hope, so they worked hard to prepare and sow the next crop. They borrowed and begged and sold and pawned. Snow and sleet fell as late as March. The signs of the season were watched with fierce anxiety. The spring was unpromising. In June the weather was hot and expectations rose for a healthy harvest. In late June and into July the weather grew cold with much rain, thunder and lightning. In early August, the first signs of disaster appeared. A dry, smelly fog rose from the ground, reported first in the Ox Mountains in County Sligo, then in Bantry in County Cork. Soon the blight spread across the whole country and virtually the whole potato crop was destroyed. Widespread despair struck the people almost all at once. They could be seen sitting on their fences alongside their decayed potatoes, wailing and gazing for hours in total silence. Soon the blight was everywhere, its symptoms easily seen. Some dashed to the towns, some wandered the highways, some stole food from the fields, some were seen eating dead dogs, horses and donkeys. Dead bodies were found with their mouths and stomachs full of grass. Nettles, watercress and wild mustard were much sought after. Seaweed was eaten, as were diseased cattle and diseased potatoes. This was, without doubt, the most horrifying period ever in Irish history. The people had no food and no money. They roamed about with little energy to speak or beg and with a despairing look. Children looked much older. Some dogs stopped barking. There are many stories of parents dying a slow death to save some food for their children. The starving tried to eat old cabbage leaves, weeds, rotten turnips, edible seaweed and raw limpets. The starvation of Ireland was achieved by deploying over half of Britain's army into Ireland, 67 of 126 regiments, to support the seizure of Ireland's food, grain, livestock, flour, dairy and poultry, etc., and escort them to the ports for export. On the 5th of July 1847, Lord Clarendon, writing from the lodge in the Phoenix Park in Dublin to Prime Minister Lord John Russell, said, "Sir Edward Blakeney, English Commander-in-Chief in Ireland, says the country is tranquil, and if it were not for the harassing duty of escorting provisions, the troops would have little to do." At that time, the workhouses were a place of dread, holding mainly outcasts from society. People, if they went there, saw themselves as ruined and morally degraded. Parents died, allowing their children to die alongside them in their hovels, rather than go to a workhouse. Then, when the disaster grew much worse, the people craved admission. Too many people with too few places. In Westport, County Mayo, 3,000 sought admission in one day, with the workhouse capacity being just 1,000. Forced away from the workhouses, people died on the side of the road, at the doors, on crowded streets, or alone in their cabins. When some cabins were entered, the sight was horrendous. In many cases, the last survivor blocked the doorway to keep dogs out. Those entering these cabins found the dying and the dead lying in straw and rags. Funerals disappeared, bodies lay on the road for days. In Galway, a man brought his wife and 2 children to the graveyard. Too weak to dig a grave, he covered their bodies lightly. Next day, the priest found a dog eating the corpses. Erris was badly hit, with thousands barely surviving on turnip tops and sand eels. In 1846, the population of Erris was estimated to be 28,000. Around 2,000 emigrated, mainly to England, and 6,000 perished from starvation, fever and dysentery. The government responded badly and too late with a kind of work for the dole scheme. The people didn't have the strength. They rose at daybreak to attend a roll call and tried in vain to work with picks, shovels and wheelbarrows. Many lay down and died. The work was task work, so the more feeble a person was, the less work he could do and the less he would be paid. Some crawled to work in the morning, often as many as 10 kilometres from home, worked as hard as they could and received 3 to 5 pence for the day's work. In numerous cases, people were not paid and died at home or on the roadside. When paid, the shop was kilometres away, with inflation as high as 400%, leaving them with no food. Far from being helped, thousands were effectively worked to death, and the health of many thousands was seriously affected. The government was urged to set up depots and sell food for reasonable prices. Lord John Russell, Prime Minister at the time, said that is utterly opposed to the teachings of Adam Smith, that is, governments should not interfere in the economy. That was an episode from my book, Ireland, 800 Years of Sadness. You can get the book on Amazon in electronic form or as a paperback. Also, you can go to core.au.